Welcome to Shepherd's Table. I'm your host, Ian Parkinson, and I have with me today Pastor Shane from St. Peter Lutheran, Pastor Patrick Schoenberger from Heights Baptist, and Pastor Roland from Victory Lutheran. So gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks, Ian. Good to be here.
Today we're going to speak to Christmas, and in particular, on a personal basis, how you prepare yourself to begin your day.
Well, I start it usually quite early. I wake up early, and I actually quite like the Book of Common Prayer, and so I use that. The Anglicans have a wonderful heritage of prayer books. Really, it's unmatched in the English-speaking world as far as I'm concerned. And I will read through the morning devotionals of the Book of Common Prayer, which takes you through all sorts of prayers. The Lord's Prayer, you recite the Apostles' Creed, you read Psalms. It goes through the whole book of Psalms every 30 days. You read an Old Testament passage, a New Testament passage. It's just a wonderful, there's time for sort of your own prayers, ex corde, sort of from the heart. And I find that very grounding. That's when I'm at my best. That's how I start my day. And I find that when I'm able to do that, I'm able to manage what comes at me at the day. If I miss that, I'm more irritable. I tend to not react as well to people being difficult or things not going the way that I had planned them to go in a day. And so those times are very important to me. I have one of those in the morning and one of those in the evening. And the one in the evening is very much reflective on the day, where the one in the morning is very much praying into what is going to come in the day. And so that's kind of how I prepare myself. The other thing that I try to do is practice reading the room by reading myself. Okay. And so basically, okay, where are my emotions at? Am I starting to get really anxious? Am I starting to get angry? Well, chances are other people are feeling those emotions too. So I keep that in check, try to see that in myself and keep it in check. And by keeping it in check myself, you sort of lower the temperature of the room as well. That's one of the things I found so useful about the idea of managing anxiety in particular. If you're finding yourself getting very anxious, if you take a moment to check that, and you can manage your own anxiety, you can usually help someone else manage their anxiety as well. So in other words, it's just a basic sort of, lets everybody chill out. Now, I just want to go to what Patrick said about finding the hills to die on. He's absolutely right. You can't die on every hill. You know, I hear things that are theologically nuts every day, but it gets into finite details where it's like, oh, okay, I'm not really going to die on that hill. Christ's divinity, as Patrick will, I'll die on the hill any day. But some things, like a minor disagreement about a thing that I'm like, well, that's not really what we believe, but it's not worth it, right? Yeah. Now, just once again, bouncing off what Patrick said, what I try to remember is Christ knew the hill to die on, and that was Calvary.
Yep.
Right? So really there's one hill to die on, and it's the gospel. It's the gospel in its purity. And yeah, pastors can get very distracted, and I think that's the other thing that burns pastors out. Is Patrick's saying, if you're just running around trying to please everyone all the time, you're gonna burn yourself out.
Well, you're just like a dog chasing his tail.
Exactly. You're gonna burn yourself out. And so you have to keep your eyes fixed on the goal. You have to know what hill God decided to die on, and leave the rest. Because you don't have the capacity to do anything else.
You mentioned the Book of Common Prayer that's normally issued to a lot of military on their basically first day in boot camp. And it's common across the world, but it kind of popped a thought into my mind. You each use different versions of the Bible in your different congregation. I know the Christian Reformed Church has just moved to, I think it's the ESB. How do you choose? Do you choose, or who chooses which version you've probably used for the last few years?
There's no hard and fast rule within the Lutheran tradition of what, I mean, there's a commonly used version in the separate denominations. For example, the ELCIC adopted the NRSV quite a few years ago. But typically they pick it, in their case, they picked it for more political reasons, because a lot of the language has been sanitized to appeal to a wider, more sensitive audience, right? So a lot of the male vernacular has been taken out and that kind of stuff, right, out of the NRSV.
It used to be known as the Good News Bible, I think.
The Good News Bible, no, that's not even really a pure translation. That's more of a paraphrase. And it was designed, I mean, the people who designed it, they had the people in mind because it's easier to read.
Okay.
But what they're doing is really translating stuff for you, and it's translated in a way that we wouldn't necessarily agree with. So paraphrases have a lot of problems, right, in that way. I personally, when I arrived at St. Peter, I started using the ESV, the English Standard Version, because I was told, and I had verified a lot of that too, that it was a closer translation to the original languages than some of the others were.
Okay.
And it kept a lot of the language solid, so if there was an abundance of male pronouns being used, it didn't change that. It kept that pretty close to the original translation. So that's the reason I used that.
Right.
Some people like the King James Version. I like it, but I find that most people kind of glaze over when they listen to it because it's very, very old English, so it's very hard to understand. Yeah. Although it's very beautiful. When I use, for example, when I go to do a funeral, and I recite Psalm 23, I always do it in King James, because Psalm 23 is not just about the words, but it's also about the spirit behind it.
Yeah.
And it's a very poetic way of saying it, and I feel it hits the heart a little sharper than some of the other ones do. And of course, there's other really good translations out there. I've kind of settled on that one, so that's the one I use, and I've adopted it specifically for St. Peter.
Great.
Yeah.
By you, Patrick?
You know, I wasn't sure how this related to difficult people, but I suppose that Bible translations can be a divisive issue in the church. You know, again, as Baptists, we don't have a hard and fast rule. And I acknowledge, you know, that every Bible translation has its strengths and weaknesses. You've got the word for word translations, you've got more of a thought for thought. Some translations really require a higher reading level to understand. You know, some are easier to understand. And so part of the translation you use, I think, really depends on the makeup of your congregation. Our congregation, you know, it's not you know, academically inclined. It's not necessarily white collar. It's a lot of blue collar. And I use the New Living Translation. One of the reasons is it's maybe more thought for thought than word for word, but it's easy for people to understand. And I preach to the people. You know, I don't get up there. People always say, you know, your sermons are easy to understand, and so it really.
Well, it's not a theological classroom, right?
No, exactly.
Right.
And so you want to preach in a way that people understand. And the thing is too, like, we have members of our congregation getting up and doing the scripture reading each week. I mean, and honestly, if you sent them up there with the King James, they would stumble. It would be very difficult for them to read. It would be hard to understand. Yeah. So, you know, we need to use a translation that works with our congregation.
Pastor Roland.
Yeah, and actually for the very same reasons at Victory, we use the New Living Translation as well, the NLT. It's very accessible, it's digestible, it's very readable. Is it perfect? No. There's some translations where there's some choices translation-wise where I'm like, but for the most part, it's a very accessible translation of Scripture. It's very easy for even children to understand because of the way it's worded. Like, it's really meant to be accessible. And I think there's a great beauty to that. Now, I just want to bounce off of the King James. You know, there's a group of people that absolutely insist on using just the King James. And there's a variety of reasons for that, most of which are bunk, even scholarly. It's very ridiculous, but that's a separate conversation. But the one thing I will say that's lamentable is prior to about 200 years ago, everyone in the English-speaking world used the King James Version, which meant we were all reading the same translation. We've lost something by not doing that anymore. The other thing that I will say in terms of poetic quality, nothing has ever eclipsed the 1611 King James Bible. And the reason why is because when they were doing the translation work, the team working on the Psalms in particular were obsessed with translating the meter into English. Everything rhymes.
Oh, okay.
On purpose.
Yes.
Because of course the Hebrew meter is not perfectly translatable, right? Because poems and music are very hard to translate into different languages, right?
Yes.
But the scholars at the time that were working on the King James went through painstaking effort to make sure their translation of the Psalms had poetic meter. So there's literally rhyming couplets trying to match what's in the Hebrew. Like it's one of the most incredible feats of translation ever. And this is the reason why it's still so endearing to this day. I do the same thing with Psalm 23. Always the King James Version.
Yes.
It rhymes. It has a poetic quality to it that nothing else does because it was designed that way. And so in that sense, in terms of a piece of art in English, nothing eclipses the King James 1611. It is a beautiful, beautiful book. But is it the most accurate translation in the world? Is it God's only translation? Did Jesus walk around in heaven and drop and fall the King James? No. Right? And so I firmly reject that. But just in terms of cultural importance and beauty, I totally understand why people love the King James Version, even to this day.
Mm-hmm. Well, and yeah, because a lot of the monks, when they did the translations, also illuminated the books. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's blood, sweat, and tears went into that whole process. Mm-hmm. I mean, I grew up with the King James Version as a child, so I've always had that affinity. I'll use the ELT.
Yeah, English Standard Version.
English
ESV?
Standard.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is easier to read, but every once in a while I get, what's the word? Nostalgic.
Yeah.
And then go back and find it. Anything else, gentlemen? Anything you'd like to bring up? Christmas is coming.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Christmas, still my favorite time of year, even though Easter is more significant, obviously, in the Christian tradition. But I would say even more accurately, Advent is my favorite time of year because I always enjoy the anticipation more than the actual event. And so I'm really looking forward to Christ the King Sunday coming up, which will end this last church year, and our new church year will begin with Advent 1, with St. Andrew's Day. The Christmas decorations will go up, and people just are in a much better mood for at least a month.
So does St. Peter Lutheran have what's the word, like a calendar or a schedule for Advent?
Well, the Advent is always 4 Sundays, so the 4 Sundays just prior to Christmas Day. And our tradition at St. Peter's, we do this, what's called a reverse Advent calendar. So I go down to what used to be the food banks, now the root cellar. Right. And I say, well, pick your top 4 items. Like, what do you most need of this year? And then I challenge my congregation. Okay, Advent 1 is peanut butter. Advent 2 is canned tuna, whatever. Oh. And we pick the top 4, and then we just got a ton of stuff sitting there by the end. And usually Advent 4, we bless everything, and I take it in that week. So people in need will get that by Christmas time, that kind of stuff. So that's one way that we celebrate, the anticipation of the birth of Christ. So,
what about your congregation, Patrick?
Well, as Baptists, we recognize Advent and observe Advent, but not to the extent that I think happens in Lutheran churches, for example. But, Advent, of course, the word means coming. And a lot of people, just think of Advent as, anticipating Christmas or preparing for the, celebrating the birth of Christ. But really, ultimately, Advent is about looking forward to the second Advent and the return of Jesus Christ to the earth, the establishment of his kingdom. And, when we see things happening in the world today that are very troubling, we need to be reminded of that, and we need to look forward. Jesus said, when you see these things start to happen, look up, for your redemption draws near. And so I just want to remind people that ultimately Advent is about looking forward to the second coming, the return of Jesus Christ.
Pastor Roland.
Yeah, and just bouncing off what both of the gentlemen said before me, it's a very special season. It's an anticipatory season, right? Either looking backwards to celebrating Christ's birth or looking forward to Christ's return, right? Because it is that dual purpose in Advent. And the readings actually for Advent reflect that, both a looking backwards and a looking forward. Christ has come as King, Christ will come as King. It's very interesting. And this is why I love the lectionary. It sort of builds this narrative for us to follow. The one thing that I would say that's going on at Victory, I mean, we have our Advent customs and whatnot, and the candles and the decorations, and that's all wonderful. But this year we're doing a big event called Starry Night in Bethlehem, where we dress the church up to look like Bethlehem, the night Jesus was born. People are running around acting like first century Judea, and we have live animals there, and
that's always dangerous.
Yeah, oh, you bet it is. You bet, it's a good time. We have a live creche, and we do all these different things. It's a great event. That's happening on December 5th. So that's a huge event for us. We do it every 2 years, but it's a lot of fun. Anyway, that's what we're looking forward to, and Christmas is always an exciting season.
Excellent. Thank you for coming in, gentlemen.
Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Go forth in peace.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Shepherd's Table.